Hi, welcome to Leading Minds. My name's Brian Boggs, and I'm joined today in the studio by Danni Peer. Hi, Danni.
Hi there, Brian.
Danni, we've known each other for a number of years. In fact, I think I'm currently up on taking money off you on bets with the rugby.
Mate, as you know, my allegiance has shifted from the Springboks to the Wallabies in the last few years, and I've probably given them a touch of bad luck, but they seem to be making a bounce back, so we'll probably square things off in the next year or two.
Yeah, well, I'm a Wallabies fan as well, but of course, as you know, come Bledisloe Cup time, my allegiances go back with to the All Blacks. But it's good fun to have this banter back and forth. But tell me, Danni, you've done something different recently. You've had a career change.
Brian, I was with a product manufacturer for quite a few years, heading up the practice management division. I was keen after that to have a look from dealer group perspective as to what the other product manufacturers were offering. And having a look at it from both perspectives, I thought better off me out on my own, developing new ideas, not being strongly aligned to any particular organization, and then being able to offer best advice, best solutions, both to the institutions and to the advisors that they're looking after.
Okay, so we now have the Peer Effect. I love the name.
Brian, thanks. The Peer Effect, I wanted to give my organization some name that wasn't specifically linked to Danni Peer, but I turned or shied away from Danni Peer & Associates or Danni Peer Group because it's just me, but I felt it would be fun to have some kind of branding to deliver my messages under, so I came up with the Peer Effect.
Okay, it's very clever. And specifically, is there one particular service that you are providing back to the industry?
My main focus at the moment is seminar speaking. I do a lot of research, picking up new ideas, having a look at existing ideas and packaging it in different ways. But in essence, seminar speaking is my bread and butter. I do some writing as well, which I thoroughly enjoy. And that pretty much keeps me occupied.
Okay. Well, there's certainly a lot of issues facing advisors at the moment. These are unprecedented times. There's no reference book that anybody can go back to say, well, we've been here before, because we haven't. It's very unusual times.
Well, Brian, maybe we haven't been here before as a financial advice industry, but certainly we've been here before as financial markets. We've had cataclysms going back hundreds of years, and possibly because our industry is so new, only really becoming a recognized profession probably in the mid-80s to late 80s. I think for a lot of professional advisors, this is new territory, and there's a lot of people looking for business solutions to manage the circumstances.
Exactly. And Danni, we discussed earlier on, one of the key aspects that advisors need to face in these tough times is to revisit what is their value proposition. Why should a client drive across town past maybe 50 other advisors to come to this particular advisor? There's certainly an opportunity in tough times for advisors to add far more value. What's your perspective on that?
Few comments over there. The first thing is, I think our industry has been very poor when it comes to defining what our value proposition is. The knock on the head that we continue to receive from industry funds, that really people are wasting their money by being involved in a financial advisor, and our absolute inability to combat this message shows that as an industry we haven't actually decided or articulated what our value proposition is. So we have to do some serious work over there. Again, another problem that creating a value proposition presents for us is that I think we work in a particularly ignorant market. If you had to take the average consumer out there for financial advice and ask them, what are you looking for from your financial advisor, I don't think you'll get any clear answers. In fact, the most common answer you'll probably get is that I'm looking for somebody to make me a lot of money. I'm looking for someone who specializes in creating wealth. And if anything, that these dramatic markets have taught us is that particular area is not really under our control, or in fact is not under control at all. We can perhaps come to the party with asset allocation, and we can bring some capital guaranteed products, but when it actually comes to creating wealth or making money and outperforming what the person in the street can do, that's not a value proposition because it's not under our control. And yet that probably is the perception that the majority of our clients have got out there. So our first challenge when it comes to developing a value proposition, both for the industry and for individual advisors, is in fact to educate the clients, to educate the market on their needs. If we can achieve this, then what we can do as individual advisors is we can refine the general value proposition into specific value propositions that focus on specific target markets, because not all clients will need the same services from an advisor. If you're asking me or some thoughts as to what the ultimate value proposition that I reckon is out there, I've got this notion that in essence, financial advice is about leadership. It's about somebody coming to you who's got some objectives, and they might be very hazy objectives at that stage, but really what they're doing is they're knocking on your door and they're saying, look, I think I need some help. I've got some objectives, I've got some goals. I'm not too clear on them, but I need some help from you. So it's not about returns, it's not about products. It's really about helping the person to fully understand what they want to achieve, and then helping them to articulate the journey from where they're at now to where they want to be. That, to my mind, is the ultimate value proposition, and yet no one really arrives at advisor's office with that request. So it's up to the advisor to educate the client as to the value that the advisor can bring, and then for the client to realize that they need that value, and in fact that leadership and that whole guidance over the journey is in fact a valuable experience that cannot be obtained in passive type investments like industry funds or wholesale type investments like industry funds.
It's a different skill set, isn't it, that leadership thing? Because sometimes you have to tell somebody stuff that they really don't want to know.
And that's so valuable, because how many great expectations are there that's going to be thwarted after many years of holding great expectations and possibly not taking the right decisions, where that great expectation may very well be obtainable with some correct decisions in the early days, yet because the journey hasn't been articulated, because the strategy hasn't been clarified for the client, some wrong decisions get made and the client in many cases can't recover. So what we've got a market with great expectations without an appreciation of the complexity of the journey. And when you're in that period of ignorance, you don't turn to professional advice. And because you don't perceive the value in professional advice, the whole concept of a value proposition is null and void. So once the client understands their needs and understands the complexity when it comes to achieving financial outcomes, then they start looking for advisors who can provide that kind of solution. And I think that's where the whole concept of a value proposition presents itself, when the client is more clear on what they're looking for. That then moves the whole focus away from best product or a pure technical type solution, where I create a very thorough technical plan, perhaps some good tax advice, and we stop at that point because we haven't mapped out the journey. I think clients are looking for the full experience.
I couldn't agree more. That mapping of the journey is such a beautiful analogy. We certainly don't turn up at the airport and say, fly me somewhere. We've got a destination in mind. Yet so many advisors, Danny, they haven't grasped the simple concept of leverage. And that is that they're still trying to be all things. They'll be the paraplanner, they'll be the admin person, and they'll try and be the provider of all of the solutions, when perhaps they're best qualified to be the provider of one of those solutions. And perhaps good leadership is understanding, do what you're good at, and either outsource or insource the other aspects of the problem. What's your take on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about practice leverage a bit, because this really is the space that I spend a lot of time looking at, which is in essence is the business solutions for a financial advisor, not the technical solutions. I see there's a lot of support for the technical solutions to give as excellent advice as possible. I position myself in the Peer Effect brand as providing business insights and business solutions. So when it comes to an advisor using leverage, I think what you're looking at the moment is very much a cottage industry, where you've got a lot of one advisor practices with one or two or three support staff. Now, the important thing is how the advisor looks at their role and how they utilize their staff. In essence, the staff in the majority of practices are used in a purely administrative role. And I think the first big leap that an advisor can make when it comes to leverage is to employ a full-time paraplanner or to outsource their paraplanning requirements. Because paraplanning is a big compliance issue, and it's also a clear value issue for the client. And it's a technical issue as well. It requires a lot of ongoing training to keep your expertise and therefore the quality of the solution up at a good level. A lot of advisors take the planning role themselves. They tell me that, hold on, Danny, I'm the advisor. Surely my client expects me to create the solution, expects me to create the plan. And I don't think that way. I think the creation of the plan, that technical mapping out of the journey, is a specialist role, and the paraplanner is that specialist. And the advisor hasn't got the time to do the planning, and the advisor hasn't got the time to do the in-depth training that a cutting-edge, high-quality solution requires. So the first big leap in leverage that I see advisors making is when they realize that paraplanning is not a role that the advisor must do. The creation of the plan must be done by somebody else. The next big step when it comes to leverage that advisors have been taking is to realize that not only must they not do the plan, but they shouldn't be managing their practice either. Most advisors are not only the advisor, but they are the practice manager as well. So they do the administration, and they get involved in the accounts, and they get involved in all the functionality to manage the infrastructure that they require to be running smoothly in order to deliver advice off that platform. Whereas if you bring somebody else in, a competent, qualified manager to take the role of running the practice away from you, then again that creates a massive amount of time. And you might ask, well, time for what, Danny? Because we're taking a whole lot of roles away from that practice principle that they feel comfy doing. So bear with me on this, and I'll end up summarizing what I reckon the advisor should be focusing on. The third giant leap that an advisor can take is to outsource their marketing function, or employ a full-time marketer that's responsible for marketing strategy, responsible for identifying suitable prospects and bringing them into the practice. So that advisor can then start off with that client walking through the door, a correctly positioned and filtered client. They can then start off at that point. That marketing manager can manage referral relationships. They can manage any kind of advertising or sponsorships or any marketing strategy that the advisor and the practice decides on. But in essence, they're responsible to get the client flow to come into the practice. That's another role that advisors spend a lot of time on, prospecting and having a cup of coffee with their centers of influence. So what's left for an advisor to do? What's left for them to do is that journey that I spoke about earlier, is to sit with their clients or prospects, to engage with the prospect, to identify, is this somebody that I can work with, to help the prospect articulate the journey and articulate the experience that they're looking for from the practice, and then to, in collaboration with the paraplanner, to brief the planner sufficiently so that a plan is formulated to get the correct objectives, to present that plan to the client, and then to manage that plan through review meetings and ongoing communication with their clients. So in essence, the financial advisor does just that. They advise in the initial advice space and they advise in the ongoing advice space. And the rest of all the activities that take place in the practice are handled by other people. And that gives them focus, and focus always breeds excellence.
Okay, well that's a perfect opportunity perhaps, that during these tough times that we're going through, that a lot of advisors are managing the downturn in the markets perhaps in a different way. And one of those ways is that they're looking at cutting costs, and they're laying off important people, when in fact perhaps a good strategy would be to look exactly the opposite way. And I'm not saying that people shouldn't make their businesses more recession-proof, but there are going to be some observations of what makes a more successful business, certainly going into 2009. Now, perhaps this is an opportunity for advisors to consider, well, maybe I don't need to be a one-man band anymore. What am I looking to extract out of this exercise that I'm involved in, which is 25 or 30 years involvement? At the end of the day, reality is that they are in business themselves. They are in the advice business. And perhaps by getting together with other advisors, then they could get some leverage by having one practice manager, one paraplanner that they can share, a marketing support or rainmaking person. What's your thoughts next year what's the outlook, do you think, Danny Peer, for advisors?
I think that advisors tend to be fiercely independent people that revel in small business. Otherwise, I'm surprised that we haven't seen more consolidation of advisors into medium and big practices similar to the accounting profession, experience in the accounting profession. And really, it's because of this fearsome independence that advisors really like to practice in that me or a small group type environment. I think as well that at the moment advice is very much a relationship driven service, in that the clients are looking to form a relationship with an individual. They're not service orientated. I think this will change. I think it has to change, because in essence, when I want to get professional advice, I'm not looking for somebody that's going to be my mate and that's the life inside of the party. In the end, I'm looking for someone who's going to give me the best advice and advice that I'm going to feel comfortable with. But as we stand at the moment, we're very much a relationship orientated profession, and therefore I'm still in my mind unclear as to the big synergies that bigger practices can create until the market wakes up and says, wait a minute, it's not that particular person that I need to do business with, but that particular firm or that particular brand that I need to do business with. So I think we need to take our direction from the market at the moment. I certainly appreciate the business synergies that a bigger organization presents, that if you have a marketing function with a marketing manager, chances are that person's going to bring a lot more people in than that one advisor can advise on or one paraplanner can do the solutions for. There's always going to be an opportunity for critical mass and scales of economy. But I think the way I'm perceiving at the market at the moment is it's still very much introduction to my mate, the financial advisor, and go and speak to Brian Boggs. I've had a good experience with him. You go and chat to him, and he's the right guy to speak with. If you had to take a Brian Boggs and other people who've really branded themselves as being the correct person to speak to and put them under some generic brand, perhaps you'll lose some of the magnetism or some of the attraction that you've created in those small units at the moment. But I think this is a market education exercise, that as soon as the market perceives that doing business with an organisation where there's more planners involved, where there's planners with different skill sets involved, so that the solution can be fuller and they can all present their certain areas of expertise to that one particular client, that's when I think the market is going to demand the comprehensive or composite practice. And that's when advisors are going to have to say, look, I'd like to work on my own. I enjoy working on my own with my family or my PA who's been with me for many years. That's when advisors are going to have to really lend a ear to the market, be market-driven, and start forming more robust, bigger businesses in order to satisfy what their target market's looking for. But I think this will take time. It's not a one-year thing. This is going to take a bit of time.
Yeah, we certainly, you mentioned before, it's a cottage industry, and it's been a cottage industry for 20 or 30 years.
That's right.
And you see medical professions, they're moving into, you can go to a medical practice and there's all sorts of specialists, chiropractors or physiotherapists, along with the GP and radiologists, all in the one medical centre. You're certainly seeing it there. You're seeing accountancy practices merging with legal practices. So the one-stop concept shop is there. And it's happening a little bit in financial planning as well, that the role of the advisor becomes more of that of a financial project manager, because there is so much opportunity being lost out there where advisors perhaps are taking the low fruit and leaving the real opportunities because their skill set's not there. Now, what a shame that is. What an opportunity for advisors going into next year to say, well, potentially I could double my business by having a strategic alliance, perhaps in-house, and forming a broader relationship.
Brian, it's an opportunity, and it's going to be something that gets foisted upon us as well. I often use the example of a shopping centre, is that people really strip shopping was what it was all about in the 70s, create a few shopping centres. Now that's overwhelmingly the area of preference. Why? Because you've got your multiple selection, park ones, and there's a whole lot of different things you can do in one location. People like one-stop shopping. People want broader solutions. Or, let me put it this way, people will want broader solutions once they wake up to the benefits of a broader solution. My observations are that advisors are responding in two ways. The better advisors are creating alliance partners that they pull in to help them develop the solution. Other advisors, as you correctly say, are spotting the opportunity to put their businesses under one roof, consolidate their practices, and make bigger practices. But there's still a big chunk of advisors that say, look, my clients want me. I've got the relationship with my clients. They're looking for certain things in what I can do for them. They've been with me for quite a few years, and it just wouldn't be right by them for me to form an alliance or to consolidate my practice with a whole lot of other advisors. They're used to a certain culture. They're used to a certain experience, and I'm not going to industrialize or create a shopping center from my practice. So there's different thinking out there, but to my thinking is that the solution is going to go into the combined practice, that you're going to have a similar experience to the accounting experience where you had a whole lot of small practices combining into some medium-sized practices, combining into some really big practices, and the overwhelming chunk of the market is doing business with them. You still get your suburban accountant who's got his 500 or got her 500 clients. That's still an area that you still have financial advisors practicing in as well. But I think that especially the top end of that client market, with more complex needs, with legal needs, with structural needs, with tax needs, with wealth creation needs, with risk specialist needs, you can't have that GP providing that solution anymore. And the only reason that, if you want me to use these words, perhaps it's a bit aggressive, these words, but the only way people are getting away with it is because the client doesn't know better. But the client will wake up and the client will say, there's big gaps in my solution over here, and I have to move on if you can't service them.
Well, certainly getting better informed and better sophisticated. My experience, Danny, in my own practice was that I also believed that the people only wanted to see me. Until 8 years ago, I was diagnosed with cancer. I had the big reality check where I had to take a step back from the business. I had 2 salaried advisors working in the practice with me. And the transition for the clients, they were concerned for my welfare, but at the end of the day, life goes on, and all they wanted to know that their affairs were looked after. And it was a fabulous reality check for me to say that, wow, I don't have to be here. In fact, I then went on to take 6 months every year away from the business, getting a life back and getting my work-life balance in check. Because, yes, the clients do want that personal touch, but it doesn't have to be 100% from just the one advisor.
Right, so I want to make a point there. I agree with you 100%, and that tends to be how we grow in life. Is something dramatic happens in our life, sometimes good but often bad, that makes us reassess the situation or forces us to reassess the situation. We get through it and we look back and we say, but why didn't we make that change years ago? It just makes so much sense. Yeah.
It's like the guy banging his head against the wall, isn't it? Feels so much better when you stop. Yeah. Now, a couple of other things I want to have a chat to you about, Danny, is that one of the big things that are affecting advisors right now, of course, is that there's massive outflows. And not only are there massive outflows, but the value of funds under management has diminished in some cases by 50%. As a result, their reoccurring income for the advisor has diminished, totally beyond their control. Imagine having a business that all of a sudden 60% of your revenue was absolutely, or has been absolutely cut, and you are now faced for going into business next year, and one of the statements of conflict that the FPA has introduced is that advisors must advise their clients each and every year the full dollar amount of any reoccurring or trail income. Now, people with legacy books are going to find this somewhat challenging. So it brings back the old argument of pricing and how should advisors deal with that? Because we're now talking, as we say, the value of their business is diminished by 50 to 60%. Yet in these tough times, this is the time that the guys are taking more phone calls, taking more shots than ever before, and this is really the time that we could say that they're offering, they're doing their best work. What's your thoughts on that, Danny?
This is a prickly area, as you know, and it raises the temperature whenever this is addressed in a magazine or at some conference. Couple points I want to raise over here, I suppose. The first point I want to raise with regards to the FPA's thinking is, I think disclosing is taking a step forward, but my concern with the direction that the FPA is taking is that disclosing something that's inherently not good doesn't really make a difference. And why I say inherently not good is because if we continue to allow the product manufacturers to dictate the pricing, we see that it's unfair in two ways. It's unfair to the advisor and it's unfair to the client. It's unfair to the advisor exactly for the issue that you just raised. If my remuneration depends on the size of my book, on my funds under management, and we go into circumstances like we're going now, and my revenue drops 50%, and yet, because of the effort I'm putting in, and because of the experience I've got, I've actually delivered more value in this last year than ever before. Why should my remuneration, why should the reward for my efforts have been halved? So if we're going to be linking our revenue to something that's absolutely beyond our control, that's simply not fair to the advisor. People sometimes raise the issue that there's an alignment of interest then between the advisor charging of the size of the client's funds in the way, or what they suggest is that if the advisor is able to increase the value of the client's funds, well, they should be rewarded for that. And if monies are lost, well, I suppose the advisor should be punished for that. I think that's nonsense. I think it's nonsense because that area is totally outside the advisor's control. We have, as a profession, no influence whatsoever on financial markets. And I see there's some pension funds and some thinking coming up with the notion that naked equity exposure, long-only exposure, is just not the way to go in future, and that we need to invest in hedge funds and market-neutral type structures and capital protection type structures, and therefore we'll take the volatility away from the client experience. Well, I've got news for them. Most of that is a zero-sum game, that not everybody can be participating in those assets because they're derivative-driven experiences, and a derivative experience is simply a zero-sum game where somebody's sitting on the other end of that exposure that you've created for your client. So we're always going to be riding business cycles as a profession, and our funds under management are going to be going up, not with hardly any input on our side, and those funds under management are going to be going down, not through any fault on our side, and to link our remuneration to this doesn't make business sense to me. Why I can see it being chosen by a lot of advisors is because anything that the advisor puts forward to the client that it's not under my control, that's the way the pricing is. The fund manager is happy for us, or the fund manager allows us to charge 1% trail commission on assets under management. It's not me, but that's the way it works from the fund manager. It's a way of not being aggressive with the pricing. It's the way of saying, look, that's how it is. And it then takes the discussion away from the value that the advisor puts in to, well, if that's the way, if that's how the charges go, that's how the charges go. I believe that if advisors spend more time and effort building the value proposition with their clients, for example, that leadership angle that we discussed earlier on, and the client clicked their fingers and thought, I see why it's worthwhile running with you, then that whole notion of fee for value could be introduced in a much more comfy way. And if a lot of advisors are very concerned about fee for value, just like you said when it comes to trail commissions coming off insurance products, is if I haven't got a service level agreement, if I haven't got a service suite that I'm delivering to my clients, if my clients don't understand the value I'm giving them, then they're not going to pay anything to me. I cannot invoice them and say, right, I'm charging you X amount each month, because they'll turn around and say, well, don't charge me. I don't want to do business with you anymore. Whereas if we're doing it really around the back, nibbling a little bit away off their platform, few $100s each month, the clients don't notice this in the same way. They don't add two and two together saying, this is what I'm getting, this is what I'm paying, I'm not happy. And because we've had a bull market and a strong market for so long, we've got away with this pricing mechanism. But I'm a massive fan, especially for the top end of the market, where there's a lot of effort put into clients, there's a lot of time spent with clients, that certainly advisors should be looking at that fee for value type business, where they set a particular or specific dollar amount with their clients. And some advisors turn around to me and say, Danny, but if we do that, we're actually going to reduce the amount of commission we get, because I'm sitting with a client who's got $20 million under management with me. I'm getting $20,000 or $30,000 from this client. If I had to charge him a monthly amount, how much could I charge? $1,000, $2,000 maybe? I say, you know what? That's in your head. That's in your mind. You've made up that that's what you're worth. But if you had to present it to your client, look, there's a lot of issues going on over here. I'm spending a lot of time on your portfolio. I'm spending a lot of time on your affairs. It's going to be $3,000 per month, which is pretty much what you were paying me under the old system. Very few clients are going to object. Those clients who perceive the value of the relationship will not object at all. And those clients who say, that's just not an option, I'm not interested at all, well, that whole relationship has to be re-looked at, because really it's been a relationship the advisor has got away with something that the client really wasn't aware, because they didn't scrutinize that disclosure. I said that it was unfair to the advisor. It's also unfair to the client, letting the product manufacturer set your remuneration. And you can see this in two ways. You can see this from an assets under management point of view. Most advisors have got a sliding scale when it comes to nibbling away at trail commission, but there are precious few advisors that would give a different service to the client with $500,000 with them, to $1 million with them, or $1.5 million, or $2 million with them. So you get some clients paying $10,000 a year trail commission, you get some clients paying $2,500 a year trail commission, and they say in the same segment. They get the exact same service. That's not fair to the client. It's a harsh reality check, and the reason why advisors can get away with it is because the clients really don't know any better. They haven't compared notes. They're not sitting around the bridge table being able to compare generic services or easily identified services, because financial advice comes in so many different guises, and there's so many different experiences that people have with financial advisors that it's very difficult for one client to say, well, why am I being charged so much compared to you? It's not a commodity. It's a very blurry type service.
Yeah, and that's exactly the point, that it's not a commodity. And this is where perhaps financial journalists are jumping on this, trying to commoditize something that is not it's not able to be commoditized. Danny, it's a debate that will be ongoing, and it'll be interesting to see if on our Blogster, instead of the Blogster, we get some feedback from our listeners as to their thoughts on the pricing issue. There's certainly pricing models and people available, experts available to help advisors through this issue, and we're not going to solve it this morning. Danny, are there any other takeouts at all that perhaps advisors could be considering and preparing themselves for next year? Because at the moment, it looks like next year is going to be a repeat of this year.
I don't think there's any dramatic changes that will take place in the very short term. I think what we're seeing at the moment with advisors is we're seeing the guys responding to the drop in income due to the shocking performance of the asset markets by managing the expenses. I don't see any dramatic changes to service level agreements. I don't see any dramatic changes to marketing or business models. It's probably early days. It's just been a year into this bear market now. And I think probably there's a robust expectation that we're going to have a nice bounce, and that asset markets will recover well before there's any kind of recovery in the real economy. So I think a lot of people have got their fingers crossed saying, look, I'm not going to make any dramatic changes, because we should see at least the equity market reassert itself, and hopefully my commission's going to recover accordingly. If it doesn't, and I'd be more on the side that says we do see some kind of recovery going forward, because I'm a natural optimist. But if it doesn't, we're going to have to relook at the business model. In particular, we have to look at the pricing. And we can't just, getting back to the pricing issue, we can't simply change the pricing basis from asset pricing into fee pricing without relooking at the business model. We really have to, as an industry, we have to clarify what the client's going to receive for the money that they're going to pay. It's not an ad hoc phone call when I get round to it, and it's not the annual review. It has to be a lot more clear, and it has to be communicated to clients, and the clients have to buy in to that in a way that they say, yes, that is exactly what I'm looking for from you. I'm looking for that proactiveness. I'm looking for that hand-holding. I'm looking for that organisation of my administration. I'm looking for that different options that you're coming up with all the time to get me to that journey or that end point of that journey. I'm looking for those soothing phone calls and then objective phone calls that you give me occasionally when I start losing hope and I start losing faith. However, an advisor wants to capture their value proposition or what they do for their clients, that I think is what we need to work on now in anticipation of having pricing pressure with our commission flows going into the future. And in any event, we'll probably see a split in our profession due to the dramatic changes in the financial market happening sooner than later. And the split is the transaction-driven financial advisor versus the deep relationship, strategic advice type financial advisor. And I think there's space in our industry for both. I don't think the guy who's servicing the mom and pops with life insurance or the young professional that needs a big income protection, but it's a very, very simple situation. I don't think we need that in-depth, complex solution that strategic advice would entail, or certainly not at that part of the client's journey. So transaction guys who go through who focus on the products, get the best product for the situation, and then really have a very industrialized client service thereafter. There's a space for those people, and they'll mainly be remunerated on the product. And then the split will take place in that deep relationship, that trusting relationship, that experience where the client works very closely with the financial advisor as the project manager, as that manager of the hub between them and the other professionals. And that client will seek advice before they make any changes in the any major financial decisions. The relationship will be very close. The financial plan will be revisited on an ongoing basis. It won't just be a dusty compliance document that's never looked at again. And in essence, I see probably the circumstances that we see now accelerating that split, and then really we'll be able to go to the market, and the strategic person will be able to differentiate themselves in such a more clear way, because the market will understand you want to buy a product, you go to that type of advisor. You want an ongoing, in-depth, valuable strategic relationship, you go to the other kind of advisor, and that'll start making sense, I think, in our industry in the medium and long term.
Yeah, because that's what happens when change occurs, and sometimes good things happen. But I think the one thing that advisors need to understand is that if they just keep doing what they're doing, and sitting in the same spot doing what they're doing, they better watch out, because they could get run over because there's a train coming their way. Danni Peer, you're a very enthusiastic and engaging person, a great Wallaby supporter, and dare I say, a great speaker, a great orator. I wish you very, very well with the Peer Effect, and we welcome you as an adjunct professor to the faculty of the Leading Minds.
Right, thanks Peer, very much.
Thank you, Danni.
Pleasure.
further programs and more information, visit the website Leading Minds Academy.